Hi guys. I'm going to show you a couple of things about the ugly mugs. I want to show you some of the detail work. So if you recall that the ugly mugs are basically just a mug that you've created one way or another with a slab. This particular one was done on the potter's wheel, and so you could create them in different ways. I often use slabs, so that's probably the video that I've asked you to try before this. But you'll notice that ugly mugs often have a lot of texture and a face that's expressive. So there's one that I've made in the past, and here's another. So really, you guys at this point have done slabs and coils, and you've done pinch pots, and some of you've worked on the potter's wheel. But you can utilize that, and then we're going to those techniques, and then we're going to also add some sculptural elements to the work. So that's kind of the assignment, is to work a bit sculpturally. One of the great things about ugly mugs is that it really utilizes texture quite a bit. So if you want to make a pretty mug, then you wouldn't have as much texture, most likely. And I think that's one of the things that I think is the most fun and interesting about ugly mugs, that their expressive qualities are there and they're highly textured. So have fun making these ugly. I mean, really, you know, there's an art to that. It's not just haphazard, but I'll show you some simple things like this first video. I want to do maybe work with how I deal with the eyes. So I'll also show you just the nose. So these will be separate from the mug itself, and then you can practice these in your exploration project. So I will also do a small bit of a mouth area for you. So the first thing you need is your clay, and I seem to have set mine down somewhere. I can't find it, so pause. There it is, that carpet texture. That's kind of interesting. So I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, accidents sometimes are kind of cool. So one of the first things that I do is I drop down a ways on my mug, and I make an impression with my thumb, usually, maybe my finger, to create a socket. So it's not just the eye, but it's that whole area that's a socket. And I'll show you that on another part of a video. But in order to create the eyeball that goes in there, then I will take a bit of clay and make a sphere. And that's probably more than what I need for most of my mugs. So I create this little sphere, and then I'm going to use something to cut it in half, because I'm gonna fake the viewer out that it is a complete eyeball, but I don't want the thickness of an entire eyeball. So part of our tricks here with being sculptural are also looking at how can I make my mug so it's not really heavy, because it's sculptural, but it's also, it's a bit sculptural, but it's also functional. So because of that, you have to have your piece so it's kind of lightweight. Otherwise, it'd be too heavy to pick up your coffee to drink in the morning. So here we go. There is that hemisphere. Now I have it, usually take it and then move the edges out a little bit so it's not quite as deep. But we want the sides of it, we want it to be that rounded, kind of like a mound, right? So that then we'll place in the cavity. So let's pretend that that's the eye socket of my ugly mug. So that should go in here like that. But in order to do that, I will need to score, slip, and weld the back of it, and slip it very well, by the way, because there's a big chance of an air pocket being in there. So it would go in something like that if I were to keep this. And I'm not going to score, slip, and weld this in this occasion, because I am just showing you what I do to create them. And I'm not going to keep this lump of clay like this, right? So there is my eyeball in there. Then I've got the eyeball sitting there. Often I have it smaller than that. Then I create a bit of a lid. Can you see how that has a tendency to go up over the eyeball, just like your real eyelids do? So what I do there is I create a small coil. I think I might just work over here, because that's so wet, it's becoming kind of mushy, and the boundaries are unclear of what I'm doing. So pretend this is on my other bit of clay. So I've got that eyeball pretty much filling up that well, and then I create that coil that I sit just barely around the eyeball. So it's kind of sitting on it, and then it kind of goes up to create that football shape when I do the other half, right? So my other half of my eyelids on the top lid would go like that, right? Now this on the face itself is going to be curved back a little bit also. So the next thing that I do is I really love that wooden modeling tool that most of you guys should have in your kit. And I would really like it if I could find mine. Okay. So here it is. I weld some of the edges together a bit, but the main thing I want you to see here is that I flatten that coil out a little bit so it becomes more like your eyelid. And then I'll smooth it into the face itself, smooth it in there. And then this becomes more of a line, more like an eyelid does. And it doesn't look quite so puffy anymore. It's not rounded. It gets a little bit wider, more like an eyelid does. So that's how I create mine. Now the expressive qualities of it are different, of course, depending on what you choose. So if I have somebody that is doing a snarl, one side of your mouth goes up higher when you're doing that. So I've observed that just by looking at myself in the mirror or in my phone. And I've noticed that when you do that, your nose and those muscles on that side of the face kind of push the eyelid up a little bit. And so the muscles that come underneath the cheek would do that too, kind of follow that. So then you might get something that does a little bit more of this, right? So eyebrows too, then this sets that. I really over dramatize a lot of things. I over dramatize the eyebrows quite a bit. So that's one thing about being an artist is it's yours. You don't have to be super realistic. You can emphasize an area if you like. And like notice on this guy, I really liked the snarl and the bit of the eyebrow that went up here. So I make these eyebrows really kind of almost like giant caterpillars, a bit larger than life, so that when they are sitting down on the table, they'll create more shadow, and that helps that kind of dark, menacing look, you know, which, I don't know, it's desirable for me in an ugly mug. I kind of think that they're funnier that way. So I've got this caterpillar-like thing, right? And what you do with it, you know, if it's bent down further, makes it so that you're more angry looking, maybe. I raised that bit of the eyebrow. Then I'm going to use my needle tool, and I just, you know, really scar the heck out of it, basically. I hatch it so that it kind of goes in the same direction that I think the brows do, but I also purposely will let some of the clay stick up so that they look really out of control eyebrows, you know. Some that haven't been manicured for a while, maybe. The crazier looking, the better. For mine, I think I really prefer if they're really just wacky looking. Kind of, we see pictures of Einstein's hair, right? Okay, so it's, yeah, thing kind of took life of its own. Took on life of its own. So there is an eyebrow, and sitting above that then could look something like that, maybe. Anyway, so I score slip and weld those on. A lot of times I work directly on the piece, so I'll make the coil like I did, and then I'll attach it, and then I'll hatch it up so that I'm not worried about messing up my texture once I am scoring and slipping and welding it. And then it kind of also, this hatching kind of helps score it to the piece. So you can see how that worked out here. Like I did some more hatching in between. Okay, so let's move on.